You're now listening to Loggers Tech Talks from Swamp Fox Insurance Agency.
Welcome back to another episode of Loggers Tech Talks, where we dive into the tools, tech, and tips that keeps logging and trucking operations running smarter and safer. I'm your host, Tank Bryant, and today I'm excited to introduce our guest, John Reid, the Southern Regional Sales and Business Development Leader for Vulcan On-Board Scales. John brings over 15 years of experience in the automotive and heavy-duty OEM and aftermarket industries, which means he's seen just about every challenge a fleet or logging crew can run into when it comes to hauling, compliance, and keeping equipment working its best. This is John's first time at the Loggers Technology Summit, and we're pleased to have him here. John, welcome to the Loggers Tech Talks.
Glad to be here, man. Thanks for having me.
All right, how was your travels in from Dallas, right?
Yep, Dallas, it was easy. Easy flight yesterday and worked around Birmingham yesterday and then drove over this morning, so it was uneventful.
Okay. Well, before we jump into it, man, how's Dak Prescott going to do this year?
You know, it's interesting. I've been in Dallas 37 years. I'm not a Cowboys fan.
Whoa! What is this?
I'm a transplant.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm a diehard Minnesota Viking fan. It's a fandom of futility, but it is what it is. I guess I don't hate the Cowboys as much as I used to be in there around. I feel for the fans.
Okay. Well, that's different. That changes the conversation a little bit, but let's jump right into it, man. So, how did you get into the world of onboard scales and weighing tech?
Yeah, it was interesting. So I started out in this industry back in the day and left it and went to some other industries and got back into the automotive heavy duty aftermarket OEM market, if you will, with products probably about 5 years ago. And the opportunity opened up here with Vulcan, and it was a good offer, so I jumped on it. And prior to a year ago, I knew nothing of the logging industry, and there's a couple other industries that we that there's a fit for our scales. And at the end of the day, Tank, you can scale up anything as far as that goes, but primarily, actually, where Vulcan, and I don't know if it's on that question, where they actually started. Vulcan is actually owned by a very large corporation conglomerate based in Israel called Vishay Precision Group, and they've been in the strain gauge measuring weights and pressures many years. Matter of fact, they own several patents. The gentleman that started that company actually is a Holocaust survivor. He spent 18 months in the floorboard of somebody's house over in I forget which country, but he was a Holocaust survivor, Dr. Zanman. At any rate, they bought out a company called Stress Tech, which is based in Kent, Washington, right there just outside of Seattle. And the Northwest is the other large logging industry region. Yeah, so the company's Stress Tech started there. VPG bought them out probably 10 years ago. And now it's just called Vulcan onboard truck scales.
And let's start with the basics. I mean, for those unfamiliar, what exactly are Vulcan onboard scales, and how do they work in logging and trucking context?
Right, and for the most part, so there's many reasons. There's several reasons what behooves a logging company, hauling company to have these onboard scales. But at the top of that chain, at the top of the value proposition is making sure that you get the maximum payload and that you're safe. Now, it's been a huge education for me here in the South. Up in the Northwest, every trailer that's manufactured, the scales it's a standard spec in the Northwest. Okay. Down here, it's an option. So we sell through distribution, of course, and work with a lot of OEM trailer manufacturers. A lot of them are right here in the great state of Alabama, and it's not a standard spec. It's an option, and I learned, and it kind of gets into politics, I believe. But if you were to look at the South region of the United States, or here, the logging region, and East Texas all the way to, let's just an imaginary line somewhere in the middle of Alabama, that's considered the West. All those mills, they won't accept overweight loads. They'll turn these guys away. So it behooves them. They got to know, hey, what's my weight?
Where am I? And
am I getting the best bang for my buck, so that I got the payload and I am being safe at the same token. that line back all the way to the Carolinas now, covering the eastern portion, which is a large, those mills, from what I understand and what I've been told, I've confirmed this in several different conversations, those mills they won't turn people away. And they're running, I mean, the GVW, as far as the national, you can't be over 80,000 pounds.
Okay. So just for my knowledge or our listeners' knowledge, you said that those mills won't turn loads away. So is it more important just from a DOT regulation standpoint, or?
Yep. And this is going to be somewhat my first opportunity to get in front of the eastern side, the guys. And there's a large group here that already has our scales. I don't know if I'm allowed to say it or not.
Absolutely.
Parnell, they're a big adopter of our scales. And we're actually been working with them on a pilot for a new Bluetooth remote setup that we're working towards. But at any rate, a lot of the mills, they will, if I'm a sole proprietor and I've got this truck and I'm, you want me to spend another $7,500 when I don't have to, I'll take my chance at getting fines. At the end of the day, it's going to be less than that $7,500. However, there's more to it than just payload, maximum payload, and being safe. There's a lot more that, as a company, as a business, what I have to be looking at is constantly my bottom line. So, for example, if you're running a truck overweight constantly, you're going to wear things out faster. Wearable items, tires, brakes, clutches, hydraulics, so on and so forth. As a matter of fact, and we can talk more about them when you start asking about that, but those are the things that I want to hit on at this conference and make sure that they're aware of the technology. And also, too, with the Bluetooth integration, there's no paperwork to keep up with. This stuff can be stored in the cloud. But yeah, so bottom line, it's payload and making sure I'm safe, but also I can now, better manage my I'm sure these guys all have a budget every year annually, and I bet you a lot of times they exceed that budget just because there's other unforeseen things that happen with the truck. Maybe they know, okay, I'm going to go through 3 sets of tires this year per truck. Maybe they know I'm going to go through this many sets of brake assemblies per truck.
Let me ask you now, what kind of equipment are you most commonly installing Vulcan systems on in the logging space in particular?
Yeah, so it's going to be on their trailers and their tractors. So the way they measure the weight, and it's done through it's called a strain gauge, and it's actually sets in pot. It's in a potting in this, what we call a load cell, and this load cell actually attaches on the suspension of the trailer, and then on the suspension of where the fifth wheel, it goes right underneath the fifth wheel. And that's how they're able to measure those weights, and they get an aggregated weight, and there's a meter. So they know at any given time what their weight is. And here's what we pride ourselves on. We're not for, like, you can't use it as a scale like you do like at the deli if you're weighing out meat and you got to buy, but we can get you within 1% of your GVW. So that's pretty darn close. Plus or minus 1% is very, very accurate.
That sounds pretty accurate. And how flexible is the technology when it comes to different types of trailers? Say, for example, pole trailers versus like a chip van.
Correct. So, and we can do both. Now, there is some differences on the types of trailers that they have in the Northwest that we don't have down here. But by and large, like the most common suspension is what they call a single point suspension, and then you've got four spring and you've got air. But by and large, out of those three, it's going to be on the that single point. But they could use it on a pole trailer to answer your question.
Okay. And so,
as well as double bunk trailers, things like that. So.
Okay. And from your experience, what's the biggest misconception folks have about onboard scales in the logging or the trucking world?
Well, it goes back to what we were just talking about, and that is most people say, okay, it's gonna maximize, make sure I know exactly how much weight I got on here. Well, in this, maximizing my payload and staying safe, and a lot of people believe that's where it stops. As far as the value add, right? What the value proposition is. And that's going back to, if I'm constantly running overweight, I'm going to wear down these other items. They're going to cost me money. For example, I do these type of value propositions, impact statements, whatever you want to call it, ROI, I stay real conservative, because it's not smoke and mirrors, and I can show you in black and white because I know you all have trailers and you have tractors and you have tires and you go through them. Now I base it on averages, and so I take the most minute one, and that's what I tell people is, if let's say you've got a fleet of 10 trucks and tractors, and you're spending $16,000 a year, $17,000 a year in tires. Those are based on 2 tire changeouts. So that's replacing every tire twice. What if I could reduce that, cut that in half? Now I've got you down to $8,300. Well, what's your scale? The scale installed is about $7,500. So the buyback on that is going to be less than a year. And then after that, it's all profit back to your bottom line.
Absolutely.
Because you're not now, okay, before we were going through 2 sets of tires a year. Now I'm only going through 1. Same could be said with brake assemblies. And I've got literature put together to give them some black and white, just to, again, and they could even take my formulas home and plug in their own numbers. That might be a little bit more accurate, but I got the going labor rate, for installation. I know what it takes to install these, versus, and then, based upon the roads and the usages, I mean, there could be, they might be replacing 3 to 4 sets a year. It could be more.
Okay. And is that where guys see the company see the biggest savings is going to be on like the tires and brakes type aspect of it? Or
Absolutely. And it's something that they're not looking at, because again, if I'm a proprietor of a business, I got so many things I'm trying to manage and stay after. I'm just got one little piece of the puzzle here talking about scales. So that's what we try to be the experts as to how we can help you better manage your assets, because they're going to wear out. You're going to have to buy a new trailer. But in the meantime, throughout the life of that trailer, you're going to be replacing tires. You're going to be replacing brakes, brake shoes, brake assemblies, clutches, just different things. And now if you really got into the weeds on this, let's say for some reason the frame of the truck or something like that was to fail, and now you're like, wait a minute, I'm still within my warranty. I can get this covered. Well, it's kind of hard. I know, because I'm a manufacturer, and how manufacturers cover warranties, some, the way it can be done. And they may, now you've got proof. If you've been tracking all your weights, you can say, we never ran this thing overweight. We stayed at the GVW that's been recommended since day one. And now we've got a failure. So it's not that we've been abusing it. So it's something that gives them a little more, you can call it another preventive maintenance measure, as if you will.
Absolutely. Because I've heard, I heard earlier today a story of DOT stop someone, tell them they're overweight. They get to the mill. The mill says, no, I'm not overweight. I got a ticket, but I'm not overweight. He gives it to the mill. I mean, have you seen instances where scale data helped the company during like a roadside check or even like a legal situation?
Well, typically, if they do get pulled over, and the state trooper, whoever's pulling them over, DOT sees that they have a scale, they just walk away. Have a nice day.
Okay. Well, there you go. that's worth time and
Absolutely.
money. And time is money is definitely in this game.
Absolutely.
Definitely. Okay. And obviously we know logging's a tough business with a lot of mud and dust and rough terrain. I mean, how is Vulcan designed to handle that abuse?
These things stand the test of time. They should last the lifetime of the vehicle.
Okay.
That it's on there. I mean, it really is. That is there. The things that could be wearable, there are some cables that might break. That's about it. The load cell itself. Do we have some that go bad? We do. We've got a 2-year warranty on the parts, and on all of our parts. And here's what's interesting is that if you look at and these scales can sit by themselves. So you mount the scales, these load cells that connect to a cable that goes through this thing. It's an actual piece of equipment. It's called a volcoder. What's the Back to the Future, the super collider or whatever conductor? Yeah. That's like a fictitious. No, it's not. It's called a volcoder, and what that does is as the pressure that is pressed onto these load cells, and we're going to show you on we got a little display. We got a little Tonka toy that my engineer put together, and you can put your finger on it, and it will see the weight of your finger.
Okay.
So it's very accurate. But going back to the durability question that you asked, the load cells are made out of this, the type of steel that it's made out of. I mean, they'll probably outlast the trailer.
Okay.
So there are people that actually can take these off their trailers as they buy new ones, and you can reuse them.
Okay. What kind of maintenance or, calibration is typically needed to keep the system accurate?
It can be done over the phone.
Really?
The first time you gotta dial it in, and the installers will do that. And after that, as I've had many owner operators call me, and I say, "Look, man, y- I'm the guy that holds the flashlight. Okay, you need to." And I send them over to Daniel, or Will. We got 3 technicians, and if I was to, and there's not a lot of people in this space, so we almost kind of have a captured market. But well, I do have some competitors out there, like an Air Scales, things like that. Um, the one thing that no one will we the after installation support that we provide, no one can touch us.
Okay. All right. And so I know, for me, like I said, I'm on the insurance side of the house and, I ask questions to customers about ELDs and GPS tracking systems. I mean, so many fleets are using those now. I mean, we're asking them, we're kind of pushing them towards using it. How does Vulcan integrate with that kind of tech?
We actually can integrate into third-party systems, and it's basically connecting the meter to that, and it's pushed through there. At that point, then it gets absorbed. So if they got a GPS system or maybe a dash camera system, that's what I was doing in a previous life. So all that information that they're getting, this is another piece, a telematic piece, and this goes back to companies don't have to keep up with it because all that stuff can be uploaded into the cloud now. And but more importantly, that's used all the time is, in a lot of cases, sometimes these drivers pull up and
Mhm.
they've gotta load their own load. So they'll jump up on the loader, or the loader can be, and they can actually track and see, and instead of having to get down off the loader and then go back to the truck and look. So we used to have a remote device where they stopped making that chip, and that was an RFI, if I'm saying that right, it was radio frequency, and they stopped making that chip. So now we're working with a third party, because we're on the Bluetooth connection. It's actually, there's an app, and these drivers will have it. It's available for Android or the iPhone, and it's just an app. And just to look and observe at your weights, it doesn't cost you anything. It's free.
Now, I will say the logging industry is, starting to see more interest in automation. What role do you see onboard scales playing in autonomous or semi-autonomous haul trucks?
Yeah, it would, the information would be available, and that way it's there in the cloud. Because again, it's a standalone. There's nothing you really have to do to operate that scale, as it sits there, and it's going to show the readout on there, and with that connecting to the cloud through their third party, um, it's going to feed it. So we absolutely can. We're there for that next future. With the autonomous and everything, being able to track all that information. You bet.
Okay. And what's one small habit or tip that you think makes life, a little easier for drivers using onboard scales?
So from that standpoint, it goes back to that whole, as they're pulling up and loading, and this one thing I don't have the answer to, but I have heard, and it only makes sense. Again, not understanding OSHA completely, I understand that drivers are supposed to stay inside their trucks while they're being loaded. How many times in this logging industry has the load, just whatever accidents happen, and a log goes ripping through that cab,
Mhm.
and if I'm in there with this remote ability that we have, the ability to have it on your phone, the driver stands away from it while it's being loaded, and he can watch, and he can give them the high sign, "Up, we're good." So absolutely, it's going to provide that safety there. It's going to protect that asset, that employee, as of that company, as well as the vehicle itself.
And, just like I said, our listeners are, some of them are, been in the business 30 years, some of the business been in the business, 30 days. Do you get much pushback? I mean, this seems pretty straightforward as far as why you would need this and how it helps and so forth and so on. I mean, is there ever a time or is there ever anything that somebody could tell you, an objection that someone would have had other than the price? Because everybody says the price. What other objections someone tries to give you, and what would your answer be to that objection?
Well, so for instance, they all claim that everybody knows, we know what a load, the full load looks like. And again, I'm somewhat in an uphill battle here in the eastern portion of the southern region, going back to, they're allowed to bring in overloaded weight trailers. Are they taking a risk themselves? Absolutely, but DOT. And I'm not here to convince anybody of anything. I just present what I have, and that not only is this thing going to keep you safe and keep you at a payload, but now it's going to help you on your preventive maintenance measures to reduce those costs, because now I'm not overloading and running a truck constantly that's overloaded.
Okay.
That's the key.
Absolutely. I can see where, this would be needed, and I can see where this is something that in the future is just going to keep, growing and getting bigger and bigger. I mean, we're all headed down the road of, technology and safety first and so forth. I mean,
the question I now remember. So back to that, if ultimately, and I don't say this to be smart, but I honestly look you in the eye and I say, do you have a minimum of $1 million sitting in a bank account doing absolutely nothing? Because again, these drivers are skilled, they're professionals. My brother was an over-the-road driver for 30 years, and I get it. These guys are professionals, what they're doing. But accidents happen. And if I'm overloaded and I hit somebody, a wrongful death suit in Alabama, minimum is $1 million. You're almost, and can you sleep at night?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have $1 million in there in the bank? I mean, are you worth taking that risk? And some people do, and that's fine. That's their prerogative. But any ambulance, this is America, baby, and we are a litigious society, and we like to sue. Just because they see that you've got a name, Swamp Fox Agency, on the side of your car, well, they must have millions of dollars. And there's ambulance chasers out there, and we deal with this on the municipal side of things because we're also in the waste management business. And they're like, well, no, we're never going to get, our cops aren't going to, the city of Birmingham is not going to pull over a Birmingham trash truck. They're not. But what if that driver, because God forbid that accident happens and he's 10,000 pounds overweight and that attorney finds out?
That's the
Ding,
$1
ding, ding,
million
ding, ding, ding.
question.
Absolutely. $1
Yep.
million.
Yep.
Absolutely. So if you're confident that you have $1 million, that you got nothing better to do than to give it away to somebody because of a freak accident, well, great.
What does the future look like for Vulcan? I mean, any exciting innovations on the horizon?
The interesting thing is that more and more the infotainment that is in the dash of these various trucks, we're going to have to move with that as well and make sure that our software is integrating to start feeding those things. As a matter of fact, I was just doing some research, just some regular old sales 101 research a couple of weeks ago, and in the state of Canada,
There we go.
I did not mean to say that at all. Oh man, is that a Freudian slip? In Canada, Ford pickup trucks, there is an option for an onboard scale.
For just a regular pickup truck.
For a regular pickup truck, you can scale up anything. So it's information that these trucks are put out a lot of information. They want to know their oil pressures. They want to know their fuel consumption, things like those. All those are telematic pieces of information that are being fed into the cloud. Why not have weight too? And that way, no, I'm not keeping it. And that goes back to there's no paper to keep up with, remembering, writing stuff down. It's all tracked and it's in the cloud. You had asked a question earlier as far as what's the main maintenance look like on these things. Can they go out of calibration? And they can, especially if they change out suspension, they have to recalibrate it. But by and large, like I said, they can be done over the phone. It's very easy to maintain that.
And correct me if I'm wrong now. From what I gather from you, the conversation we're having, you're the salesperson, and you're also the person that's demonstrating this product or
Correct.
Demoing this product. So I'm sure you've seen it all, man. What's one of the most memorable field experiences working with loggers out there?
I think one of the coolest things, and I've come to appreciate this I've been in other industries, and I'll sidetrack a little bit here, like the grocery store business. So many of the CEOs today, they started out bagging groceries. And one of the first things, the conversations that I was having as I was getting out here, so I have never, this is my first opportunity covering Mississippi, Alabama. I've always covered Texas, Oklahoma in my different capacities, and I've always gone west, but I've never gone east. And what a breath of fresh air. And they're Southern gentlemen. doing business with these gentlemen. They are great. If there's an issue, they're not pounding their fists. They're not ringing me, blowing up my phone. They're not dog cussing me. They're just very straightforward. As a matter of fact, so they're great guys to do business with. But and this is the cool thing. I'm a history guy, and I like this. I'm standing in front of these different owners. They could be an installer of mine. They could be an OEM, manufacturer, but the actual loggers, third generation, fifth generation. It's in their blood. It's in their DNA, and these guys are passionate about this. Is how they provide and keeping their assets safe, and that those guys can continue to show up and do their jobs and take care of their families. I mean, at the end of the day, that we've got a big responsibility, and being able to give them that information that keeps them safe and keeps their drivers, their employees safe, and everybody goes home at the end of the day and goes back, and walks through into their house, see their loved ones. Man, that's kind of the cool thing about this, and that's why I take it to heart, and I have a lot of integrity. And if we're not hitting our shipping, times, and if we're on back order, I'm like, guys, we're keeping people unsafe. We have to have, we've have this market. We have to deliver. So, and by and large, our company does a good job of doing that. But no, I think that's the neat thing is that these have been around for generations. This business, this logging industry.
Okay. Well, John, I appreciate it, man. John Reid, Vulcan Scales, coming in here, teaching us about scales and how they work and why they're important. And we look forward to hearing from you guys. You guys speaking tomorrow, correct?
Yeah, I believe so. I don't know what that looks like, but we'll be prepared either way.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. Well, once again, John, I do appreciate you coming and speaking at the Loggers Technology Summit. It's first year here. Hope you have a good time tonight and a good
We're
time
excited.
tomorrow, and enjoy, what all Auburn, Alabama has to offer.
Absolutely.
All right. I appreciate
Thanks,
it, John.
Tank. Appreciate you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to hit that follow button on YouTube for more great content from Swamp Fox Insurance Agency.